Top of the morning, and we are back for episode 4 of your favorite morning podcast that tends to come out in the afternoon because of the internet at work. So let's talk about a few things. We officially have our first suspension of the year. We had a big suspension last year. Allen B, in a college football game, lost his quarterback due to a hike and haul, and Phil was the victim. Well, from the ashes of defeat rise the newest perpetrator as Phil as our first suspension this year with his Nebraska team. So what happened, why it matters. So first off, competition committee met. It was a unanimous 3 votes in favor of the suspension at hand. And that is a 1-game suspension for Dylan Raiola. So what happened is in that game against Auburn with about 7 minutes, 50 seconds left, up a touchdown on, I think they were on their 39, on the 39. So on Auburn's 39, or the plus 39 for my football coaches. He's on a plus 39. It was 4th and 5, and he goes for it, gets it, eventually scores on that drive, making it a 2-score deficit for Auburn to try to make up. So here's the problem. There has to be a line somewhere for the 4th downs. So I get the 4th and 4 and 4th and 5. All right, and for what it's worth, I'm not mad at Phil for thinking 4th and 5. Everybody likes a good, base 10, 5-digit increment, right? But the reason why we went for that is so that we can include 4. So 4, 3, 2, 1, and then anything, end goal in between, right? So that way 4th and less, 4th and 4 or less, right? And then 5 and above. We're asking you to punt just because of how offensively dominant the game is, not to mention, if you played fucking Florida lately, how dominant the fakes are in those given scenarios for the punts as well. So that is where we're at with that. And as a result, because there wasn't a make right, I didn't see anything where Phil punted back or anything like that. That's the first thing we talked about with suspensions this year, is if you make it right, then okay, I have nothing to say about it. You're good to go. Second is how big of an impact that play had, right? Kind of taking valuable time off the clock in that 4th quarter, making it to where he had 2 scores to reciprocate versus if Auburn would have gotten that ball on the punt, then he would have got it. Or, there could have been a field goal. There's something to say there, but either way, points were scored, and Auburn was at a pretty big disadvantage there when he should have got the ball back. So either way, that's the thing. Know your rules, and all good. But no ill will towards Phil. He apologized. He owned up to it. We're all good. All right, that's 3 minutes talking about Nebraska. Let's talk about the rest of it. The number 1 seed, Florida Gators, coming off of their big-ass beatdown of the LSU Tigers. LSU Tigers is crazy to say on accident. I'm sorry, Donnie. I didn't mean that. But nonetheless, they headed out to Utah out west to take on the Pac-12, an unranked Utah team, but nonetheless a good Utah team. And they found out the hard way that you got to come correct. And Utah was able to put a beat down on that I think kind of surprised. I think everybody thought it was going to be a good game. I thought it was going to be a good game. DJ Lagway is obviously right now possibly the best quarterback in the league. And one of the most dominant quarterbacks in the league aside like Lenore Sellers. So I think everybody's kind of expecting him to pick on a Utah defense that is not exactly sporting many superstars, if any superstars or any pro caliber guys. And they worked together as a team. Home field advantage helped out a little bit. And then a good run game, some explosive plays from Utah's offense led to the end of Florida. So they will drop to 11th in the seeds. From 1 to 11th, I don't think I've ever seen a team drop straight up out of the top 10 like that. And your new number 1 seed is the Texas Longhorns, who beat Missouri this morning. So it looks like that number 1 seed is safe for now with Orange Punch. Ohio State had their next game after they barely held on for a victory against UCLA, and it wasn't pretty. Talking to Harp and what's going on with that Ohio State team and looking through that roster, obviously there's not going to be a lot of sympathy league-wide for the Ohio State Buckeyes. That being said, there are some major flaws on this football team that may not be able to be immediately made up for with the receiving talent that they do have and the defensive back talent that they do have. And that's specifically at offensive line. This team is definitely rough at the interior line, and the whole right side of the line is just not really there. You take a look at, say, like Michigan's offensive line, right? And they've got just star dev tackles all over the place, good seniors and juniors, and a really high-quality underclassmen. It looks like Ohio State kind of forewent that, and as a result, he played this Oklahoma team that had number 8 was going absolutely nuts. And Joey was able to kind of benefit off of some really good pass rush. There were guys open when we watched the game back, but not having enough time. They hurt the quarterback. Got the second quarterback in the game. Just played good ball. And on the offensive side of things, OU is really, really fun to watch, man. It's a match made in heaven for a guy like Joey, who, you got Jaden Ott, who is, the receiver or halfback transfer from Cal, who is one of the best halfbacks in the game. Really solid quarterback. So this OU team is going to be fun to watch in the future. And, Ohio State reeling a little bit early, not wanting to take a conference loss, but keep in mind, Oklahoma is in the Big Ten, so they're up 2-1. They were number 3 at the time, 2-1. They shouldn't drop too far, but that's that. Notre Dame got their first big game. They're number 2 team in the country. They took on number 13 Oregon. Oregon reeling after a tough game against Boise State. They were down 17-0 at one point. Came back, I think, to win that game 27-17. So Ahard has got some stuff cooking, but per himself, dealing a little bit with the rage monster. Maybe he's got some big expectations for himself as an Oregon team versus maybe Washington last year that needed to be built out. And as a result, when the results aren't there, he's, coach get fired up. The whole house can hear it. Now he's got kids old enough to make fun of him for it. So at least mine doesn't realize that I'm being ridiculous when I'm yelling, but his do. So, but he was able to lock in and beat Boise State. And then I think he kind of paced Notre Dame for a majority of this game. It wasn't a blowout. It ended that way, but a little bit further on the score than it might have should have been. But a good game. I think Notre Dame had quite a few CPU opponents. I don't know if this was their first user game. I do think he had Miami early in the season, so maybe second user game. But figuring things out there, Notre Dame just has to have a good record. You can afford a loss against a ranked Oregon. That's okay. It's just going to be a matter of can he rebound, can he keep things right, and keep that record high enough to make it to the college football playoffs. So, there's Notre Dame there. Let's see. Were there any other? We talked about the Auburn-Nebraska game. Trying to peek through and see. There was a Georgia-LSU game that Donnie really needed to come back from that Florida matchup. And, Caden Durham, guys, again, we talked about, like, Parker out of Utah who, had 3 rushes into the game against Florida. He had 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, we know that there's deadly running attacks, but I would be incorrect if I said if the most terrifying running back in the league was anything other than Caden Durham. That dude is 1 second away from scoring, 1 missed block away from scoring. You don't pay attention, screenplay, scoring. You don't pay attention, wham, you're out of gap, scoring. He is incredible, and I think that's what is going to make Donnie as deadly as he has been. And that's that was the case here against this Georgia team and that defense. So on the flip side, Georgia has had a rough start to the year. He is an SEC team, so you're expecting that, big roster. But losses to Arizona State, and then getting this matchup here, it ain't easy. It ain't easy being Georgia, let me tell you. Travi definitely is showing a little bit of improvement, but I think there's some scenarios where he's just not seeing the field all too well. We poked out yesterday a couple times in the stream where guys kind of popped wide open, and he's a little drift happy, I guess you could say, and not in like a rule breaking way, but just so much in a way that like he's hurting himself by locking into reads. When somebody's drifting with their quarterback, they're normally locking into a read and following their thumb is following their eyes, and he's not making reads. And as a result, he's really getting the ball off late when there are open guys, or throwing a lot of picks because he's late to the throw. So it'll improve. Georgia's going to be able to replenish talent or even create talent. That's the benefit of a recruiting scenario like Travi, is if he's got a team that's not really fitting his style, go get the team that fits your style. Whereas other guys are just going to have to recruit to fill their currently existing gaps, and see how that goes. FSU versus SMU last week. That was an interesting bout. I kind of was curious. SMU took a forced loss to Texas to start the season, but since then has been 4-0. Hasn't had like maybe the toughest user road, but putting games together. Damn, I'm tired. Putting games together, figuring things out, getting points on the board. This is a good immediate offense. We talked in the tier list that SMU might not be as built out for the future, considering they've got so many Texas teams to recruit against, A&M, the TCUs, the Baylors, the Texases, any of those other guys that start creeping into those Texas pipelines. So I don't know what SMU's recruiting looks like, but right now they look like they might be ACC favorites. You know, you got Clemson out there. Obviously, Warren will always be considered a favorite, but Warren had a game against Pitt where he needed a user or a computer interception. Not that he needed it. I'm sure he could have made a play, but, you know, Pitt, we haven't seen many times where a team like Pitt would be in an opportunity to beat Warren on a game-ending drive. But as a result, you know, UNC came through. But that's the thing. So this isn't obviously any shade of Warren, but more so saying, hey, if SMU's going to have some skill, and I think they play UNC this week. So that's a matchup to watch out for is, you know, where's UNC at? You know, where their playbooks, with their roster, with their just flow. You know, do they have an identity yet? And are they going to be able to hang with SMU? So Warren's skill has kept them relevant. But close games against Boise where they were losing for a lot. Close games against Pitt where they were losing out the gate. I'm sure Warren does not enjoy being the fourth quarter comeback god. He'd much prefer to lock these. He's most used to locking things up in the second quarter and things like that. So, last note, make sure you're playing your games. Make sure you're checking your schedule. I had to make the unfortunate decision to not allow some force wins against the CPU this week. Keep in mind, if we are trying to early Vance, you know, a 24-hour Vance or a significantly early Vance, and the only thing holding us up is a computer game, we will make the decision pending on who that is, right? Like, is that a ranked opponent or is this FCS Midwest or whatever? And have you played your other CPU games? If I've seen that you've played your other CPU games and won or just, you know, have been playing them, okay, then in the interest of keeping the league going, we'll throw a force win in there to help you out. This isn't anything that we don't do for anybody else in the league. That being said, if I catch that there's multiple times that you have not played your CPU game, I'm going to fair sim it. Early Vance or not. I'll reach out to you. Hey, do you plan on playing your game against UConn? No? Okay. I'm not handing out force wins because you don't want to play the CPU. But I understand that, you know, sometimes the league games, sometimes it's a week where there's less people with those games, with user games, so they get done quickly and maybe you just got busy or whatever. Okay, that's cool. The league does not need to wait for you to beat up on UConn. However, the expectation is that you should be going into every week expecting to play your game. So if I see that you're like holding your games off to the end of Vance or whatever, and we're, you know, if it's a 9 o'clock Vance and we're about to advance at 8, I'll reach out. Hey, can you play? No, I can't play. Okay. I'm not giving you a forced loss, but, you know, we'll let the sim gods decide. And I'm sure you guys don't want that. And I'm sure you guys want your opportunity to really have good career days for your players against these CPU teams. So, Indiana was the first, I guess, victim of having to take a sim against a big CPU opponent. However, Indiana won. They beat number 6 Illinois. So a lot of you guys dropping down the rankings with losses are going to be happy to see a 6th-ranked team also dropping, kind of saved the free fall a little bit. But yeah, this is just a disclaimer. We're going to do things in favor of the league, but we are absolutely aware of those who game the system. You know, like I just watched USC barely beat Washington 14-13. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's kudos to Steele. Playing those games matter. You know, Pitt lost to Duke. These are tough games early in the cycle. So the idea isn't we're just going to be giving out free wins to some people while the others have to struggle. So if I catch you being the last one to play your CPU game multiple times, say less. We'll handle that. So, all right, that is it for episode 4 of Top of the Morning. a little bit of CM information in this one. Thank you for listening. As always, have a great weekend. Play your games. Let's get advancing. And yeah, Madden drops soon. So I'm just kidding. We're not doing a Madden League. Later, boys.